My voice is the voice that guides you home safely each and every day.
24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
I am the voice of the safest and most efficient airspace in the world.
I have to be 100% of the time.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am a professional air traffic controller.
Welcome to another AAA One-on-One. We're privileged to be back in the office of Congressman Sam Graves, Republican from Missouri's 6th Congressional District. Thank you for being back with us, Congressman. Yeah. Our loyal viewers will know that you are a number of things. Most notably, since we were last in your office, your colleagues elected you to serve as Ranking Republican on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Congratulations on that appointment.
Thank you.
A recognition of your service on the committee, leading the Highway and Transit Subcommittee as an aviation enthusiast, 4,500 hours commercial rated pilot, general aviation enthusiast, and I have it on good authority that you're restoring a couple of vintage aircraft as well. So you know aviation inside and out, and we're going to dive into some of the issues before the committee, but why don't we start off big picture. Let me ask you, taking over as ranking member of the committee, the top ranking Republican, what are your priorities in that role as we enter and get going in the 116th Congress?
Well, the biggest thing is obviously an infrastructure bill, and if we're able to put an infrastructure bill together. We've been talking to the president about what his priorities are, what he would like to see, talking to Peter DeFazio about his priorities, and mine are still the same. It's incorporating technology into any bill that we might come up with, trying to solve the Highway Trust Fund problems moving forward, and you know, and the variety of other things that obviously go along with that. But those are two of the biggest priorities by far moving forward, and hopefully we're going to be able to get an infrastructure bill. This is one area that I think Republicans, Democrats, House, Senate, and administration can all come together and be able to move forward with.
Yeah, you penned an op-ed a couple of weeks ago. I think it was on the State of the Union address day that ran in some of the Washington publications, expressing optimism that even in the wake of 35 days of shutdown and acrimony between the parties and divided government here in Washington, that infrastructure really is something you think the parties can come together on. So you are optimistic, you see a path forward?
I'm optimistic, I absolutely do. I think we've got a narrow time frame to be able to do it in, because there are some on the far left that don't want to see the president win with anything. But I think we've got a little bit of a time frame opening right here, and if we do something before the August break, I think we'll see something go forward. If it goes beyond that, I think it's going to be very hard to be able to move a bill.
Yeah, you think we get into presidential politics,
That's right.
So we've got basically between now and August break to really push this together. You mentioned Chairman DeFazio. The committee traditionally has been a bipartisan committee. I know you and he have worked together closely. What is your game plan for moving forward given that compressed time frame?
I'm going to spend a lot of my time working between the White House and Congress, or working between the White House and the House of Representatives. You know, trying to be that go-between for the Democrats on the committee, Republicans on the committee, and then what the administration would like to see. So I'm going to spend most of my time doing that and you know, bringing those ideas forward. Obviously, the president is very interested in streamlining a lot of these projects that are coming up. That's also another one of my priorities. You know, so that's a good example of something that hopefully we can bring into this bill and incorporate into this bill and bring one of those, you know, priorities from the administration over.
Yeah, so you hit on it a little bit. The president's clearly been out there talking about infrastructure for a couple of years. The Democrats have been pretty aggressive in outlining what it is that they want to bring to the table. Congressional Republicans haven't really been as front and center. I think that's the role you're going to play, and as you mentioned, just bringing people together. Regulatory streamlining, some of the other things. What do you see as high priorities for congressional Republicans as we put together a package?
The biggest thing is going to be, you know, trying to fund it, or where that price tag is going to land, and then figuring out how to fund it from that point. And everything's on the table. You know, every option is open, and then it also depends on how broad, you know, the proposal is. If it goes beyond just traditional highways and bridges, you know, if we include aviation, if we include pipelines in there, if we include ports, inland waterways, how far do we go, and what does that do to the overall price tag, and how we pay for it is going to be very important to Republicans.
Well, you're obviously very familiar with the highways. A bill needs to be done by next year.
Yes.
You raised the question of how broad does this infrastructure package go, and my question to you is, as aviation groups, we're eager to see aviation addressed as part of this. Mr. DeFazio's talked about highways and airports and some of the inland waterways. Do you see the package being that encompassing, or is that still an open question?
It's still an open question, and it's possible those could be individual bills as we move forward. So it is open at this point, and a lot of that again depends on the price tag. If we simply can't put together a large, all-encompassing bill because of the price tag, then we'll start breaking it into smaller pieces.
And that's where things have traditionally kind of fallen apart.
Yes.
The notion of an infrastructure package has bipartisan appeal, but when you start talking about how do we pay for this, that's where you've run
price tag,
into problem. Are you feeling, again, on the optimism, are those the gaps too big to bridge, or are you still optimistic that we
I'm
can
very
get
optimistic, and there's numbers being thrown out there, and it'll probably fall somewhere in between, what those numbers are. We have to be realistic, as we move forward, but I'm very optimistic about being able to get this done and being able to find that, that common ground. Infrastructure is something the government should do, and they should do well.
Right. So I want to talk a little bit about aviation, not surprisingly. You mentioned that it's an open question of how we address that, if that's part of a package or if we move something separately. We obviously Congress passed a 5-year reauthorization bill last year. For the airport community in particular, one of the missing pieces of that was an increase in the local authority with the passenger facility charge to address increasing needs. You've been a leader in getting AIP dollars on the table, and we thank you for that. Our issue from the airport community has been there's never been enough federal dollars to meet all the needs that exist. So we've asked for the local authority, as you know. Where do you see the PFC debate going, and what are your thoughts on the notion of lifting that cap, which hasn't been adjusted in 19 years?
So everything's on the table, as I mentioned earlier. I've traditionally always opposed at least the packages that have been in the past, at least for PFC increases. I'm open to taking a look at everything that's out there. I have always concentrated, as you pointed out, on increasing AIP. My proposal in the last reauthorization was to go from $3.35 billion up to $4 billion, which would be a huge shot in the arm for aviation, for airports overall, and I'll continue to push that and take a look at whatever package is out there for PFC. But I'm open. I know we have to do what we can to help airports, obviously, and get that money flowing and find those dollars.
Well, we appreciate that. We look forward to working with you, obviously, as the debates move forward. Before we let you go, and you're a very busy time, so we appreciate the time today. You're coming from a hearing before the Aviation Subcommittee on the impacts of the shutdown on the aviation industry. Chairman DeFazio, Aviation Subcommittee Chairman Larson have both introduced legislation that would essentially immunize aviation from further shutdowns. As we speak today, it looks like we're moving towards an agreement that may forestall a second shutdown, but that's certainly a possibility. Just interested in your perspective on this notion of immunizing aviation and allowing for the expenditure of trust fund monies in the event of a shutdown. Your thoughts on that, and whether or not you think it's realistic that Congress would actually approve something like that?
Well, it's hard to tell. I venture to think that that will not be approved. I don't think that the Senate will go for it. It's hard to be that person that gets to decide who's going to be the winners and the losers. I think Congress just simply needs to do its job and avert shutdowns by passing the budget and the funding bills that need to be passed. This last one obviously centered around national security. There's obviously a difference in opinions between whether or not we should make national security an important issue. Republicans believe it's paramount. I think it comes back down to that. Simply Congress doing its job instead of passing another bill to to again pick those winners and losers. I think we need to do our job and get the funding bills passed.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, in the midst of trying to negotiate this final agreement, are you optimistic that we're going to get an agreement and Congress will figure out a way of funding the 19 bills?
I think so. It's looking very, very good at this point, which is great news. The conference committee coming together and working this out, and at least in terms of the shutdown, and then moving forward with the appropriations bills. So that's what Congress, that's the number one priority. We have to, at least in the House of Representatives, have to get those funding bills passed. And that's the number one priority for Congress doing its job. And so I think that's what we should do.
Great. Well, a note of optimism to end on today. Again, appreciate your openness to allowing us to come into your office and talk to you about these issues and your continued leadership on the Transportation Committee. Congressman Graves, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. Absolutely.